Hello and welcome to Literally. I'm Anthony Rosenberg, and today we're going to be looking at commas. Now, if you haven't seen the previous post, I recommend you go back and see that first. I will be making several references to that. But today we're moving on into new territory. Not so new, there'll be some things that overlap, but certainly some new ideas here today. Last post we looked at commas in coordination, and we'll be looking at that again today because there are some other ideas, other problems that we need to solve. We'll be looking at when not to use commas when we're coordinating sentences, and there is this other subject of commas in subordination, and we will not be looking at that today because we do not have time. So we're going to be moving on to the next post for commas in subordination. If that's what you're looking for, it's probably going to be in post 3. All right, just to recap, coordination, you may or may not remember. If you haven't seen post 1, I recommend you go back, but this is a phrase that I repeated from post 1, and it is the basic definition of what is coordination. It's when you join two or more linguistic items of equal grammatical value. In post 1, we talked about joining noun to a noun, a verb to a verb. So those were the things that we covered in that post. Today I won't be talking about this again, but it's good to remember the ideas of how we coordinate things, which is basically to join things. All right, the way we join things is usually done in English through coordinating conjunctions. So these are our favorites, our common ones. We call them fanboys. So for and, nor but, or yet, and so. The ones in blue are the more popular. We use these ones all the time, and, but, and, or. For has several meanings, but for it to be a coordinating conjunction, it needs to mean because. And so has several meanings, but for it to be a coordinating conjunction, it needs to mean therefore. So they're the ways that we actually create coordination. We coordinate things, we join things that are of equal grammatical value. If you don't remember that, it might be worth your while going back to post 1. Moving on. Today we'll be looking at sentences of equal grammatical value, right? So rather than join just grammatical items, we're going to be joining sentences, or what I'm going to be referring to quite often is clauses. In fact, grammatically speaking, they are clauses, but let's just use sentence because clause sounds so formal and it sounds almost like legal jargon. So we're just going to say sentence, but I'll probably use the word clause because I can't help myself. The simple example I had in the first post was I diet, so I am hungry. You can see that I have the coordinating conjunction so, but the two sentences or clauses, if you prefer, are I diet. So by itself, that's a sentence. I diet. Oh, do you diet? Yeah, I diet. So that's a sentence. And another sentence or clause is I'm hungry. Are you hungry? Yes, I'm hungry. So I'm hungry is a clause or a sentence by itself. And these here are joined by the coordinating conjunction so. And you'll see that the comma is there, and I will tell you why very shortly. All right, let's see how we coordinate our commas or use the commas in coordination. There are two main reasons. One is to list 3 or more items, and the other is to join independent clauses or sentences, which is our focus of today. If you want to know more about listing items and how you use the commas to list them, go back to post 1 on commas on the blog, because we're not looking at that today. We've already done that in post 1. So this is post 2, and we're moving on. Looking at how we join independent sentences or clauses. Just so we're clear, independent means something that can stand alone. In the previous example, I used I diet. So if I came up to somebody and said, I diet, they would say, okay, congratulations, because they understand the sentence. It stands alone by itself. It doesn't need any extra information to make sense. The other one was, I'm hungry. If I come up to somebody and said, I'm hungry, they'd be like, okay, go get some food. They understand it because it can stand alone. So independent has that idea of standing alone. Here's my next one, which is I eat corn. If I said to somebody, I eat corn, they'd be like, congratulations, whatever. So it makes sense by itself. It doesn't need any extra extra information. It could have extra information, but it doesn't need it. That's the beauty of the independent clause or the independent sentence, also known as a simple sentence. So a simple sentence is an independent clause, and some people just say independent sentence or independent clause. Grammatically speaking, they're called independent clauses, and they are simple sentences. Here's another one. I don't eat corn every day. So just using a negative form of it, it's the same thing. It's an independent clause and it's a simple sentence. Incidentally, just so you know, clauses are called clauses because they have a verb in them. If a group of words has a verb inside the group of words, then it is a clause. If it doesn't have a verb, then it's not a clause. I'll give you an example. If I say at the movies has no verb. It's just a preposition, an article, and a noun, movies, at the movies. So it's not a clause, it's a phrase. If I say going to the movies is a clause because we have the verb go. So both of our clauses here, I eat corn, I don't eat corn, they are clauses because they have the verb eat. Whether it's positive or negative doesn't matter. I'm going to join them. Look at the magic. There it is. I eat corn, but I don't eat corn every day. It's a little repetitive, so let's change that second corn to it. Yeah, that sounds a bit more natural in English. That's got nothing to do with our commas. We can look at that another day. I eat corn, but I don't eat it every day. That's probably a natural sentence in English. And we have two independent clauses, two simple sentences being joined by a coordinating conjunction, but, which we're going to refer to as glue. It's the glue that joins our independent clauses together. It's wonderful. When you join independent clauses or simple sentences together, you create what's known as a compound sentence. So compound has the idea of things joining or accumulating, let's say. But remember, a compound sentence must have things of equal grammatical value. So we have an independent clause and an independent clause. We have two of them and they're joined by a coordinating conjunction to create a compound sentence. Simple sentence, one clause. Compound sentence, two clauses, but they must be equal. They must be independent. All right. Something to notice in this sentence, which will help us later, is that we have the word I in the first clause and we have maintained the subject I in the second clause. The fact that the second clause, the negative sentence, the negative part of the sentence, is there, I is there, means that the comma is more than necessary. You should have a comma before your coordinating conjunction if the second subject is there. Now there are some moments where you will remove the comma when you have ellipsis. We'll talk about that shortly, but at the moment what's most important is you have a second subject, whether it's the same as the first one or not, that's irrelevant, but the fact that the second subject exists means that the comma is needed. When you're joining these independent sentences, you can do a few different things. We're going to look at some examples here. The first one here is I read books, but I don't read magazines. Very similar to the corn example before. You'll see here that we have our coordinating conjunction but, just like with the corn example, and we have I and I, just like in the previous example before. So we have I, subject in the first clause, I, subject in the second clause. The comma is correct. We have a coordinating conjunction, so it's perfect. It's also a compound sentence. I could reduce this to I read books but not magazines because I don't need to repeat books. It could be an ellipsis. Yeah. So not tells me that the verb read is in ellipsis. So the comma is correct. Another example with a different coordinating conjunction here is you can take a bus or drive into the city. You'll see here that you have an ellipsis with you. You can take a bus or drive into the city. The fact that the verb is different, take or drive, and we're using or, means that the comma is necessary because we're changing the action. In the first sentence, the action was the same, reading and reading. In the second one, we're taking a bus, or we're driving into the city. So the fact that the verbs are different reinforce the idea that you kind of need a comma. Generally speaking, I don't think I think there's one case where you don't need the comma for or. Or is a coordinating conjunction that generally requires the comma, even if the second subject, you, here is in ellipsis. He stole my bike, so I reported him. You may remember before that I spoke about so, and for it to be a coordinating conjunction, it needs to mean therefore. So the meaning here is, he stole my bike, therefore I reported him. So in this case, the comma is correct. We have two independent clauses. He stole my bike, I reported him, and we've joined them with a coordinating conjunction, so, and the comma is correct. I didn't read the book, nor did I see the movie. So we have two different verbs, read and see. We have two independent clauses. I didn't read the book. The second clause, as an independent clause, would be I didn't see the movie. When we use nor, what we do is we take the negative from the auxiliary verb did and we turn it into the negative coordinating conjunction nor, and it requires you to make this structure, which is called an inversion. I'll be doing a post on inversions, so keep an eye out for that. I won't get into that now because it'll take me forever to explain it. But basically, after nor, the fact that it's a negative coordinating conjunction means that you are required to use this this structure, did I see, which looks like a question, really, doesn't it? But it is a coordinating conjunction used to join two independent clauses. The comma is correct. The party was pumping. It means the party was really happening. It was a good, fun, and exciting party. Yet she felt bored. So we have two independent clauses. The party was pumping. She felt bored. And we've joined them together with a coordinating conjunction, yet, much like the word but, and the comma is required. The last one for this list here, he was quite rude, for that was his nature. Now, this is not a very common structure in English because using the word for as because is a little bit literary. You'll hear it in, I think it's in the Australian national anthem, and it's in some poetry and things like that. But you need to be careful when for is used as the idea of because. He was quite rude because that was his nature. Then we use a comma before it because it is a coordinating conjunction. The two independent clauses, he was quite rude, that was his nature. Those two are joined to make a compound sentence. The comma is correct. Okay, the hardest part about commas and coordination is knowing when not to use them. I don't want to say this is a rule. There's a bit of a rule here, but it comes down to a little bit of style. So it can be a little subjective. The first idea is when the compound sentence, you may remember that a compound sentence is two independent clauses that are joined by a coordinating conjunction. Remember, I eat corn, I don't eat it every day. That was a compound sentence. So when your compound sentence is nice and short and it's well balanced, then you have the option of removing the comma. I have an example, don't panic. The second reason is when the subject in the second clause is in ellipsis. Now, you may remember my example with corn again. I eat corn, first subject. I don't eat it every day. So the second subject, the subject in the second clause, right? When that one is in ellipsis, we tend not to use the comma. There's logic to that, and I believe that that's a clearer one to understand. The first one is a bit subjective, and we're going to look at that. Short and well balanced. What's short for you may not be short for me. What's well balanced for you may not be well balanced for me. Here's our example. It was very simple, yet they liked it. We have a compound sentence joined by a coordinating conjunction. The first independent clause was it was simple. The second was they liked it. So when we join them together, there's no reason not to use a comma here. But it's so short and it's well balanced. No particular part of the sentence is longer than another part. So you have the option of not using the comma. As I said, it's a compound sentence. So you have the option. The second reason is that you have the second clause, the subject in the second clause is in ellipsis. Let's have a look at an example, because there's nothing better than an example. They sold the house and bought a boat. So they sold, so they is the subject of the first one. They sold a house. And the other independent clause was they bought a boat. But as you can see here, they is in ellipsis, because we don't need to repeat it. We know that they sold the house, and we know that, and by the general context of the sentence, it was the same people that bought a boat. So we have this they in ellipsis. In this particular case, we would remove the comma. If you put the comma in, as I have just done now, before the and, so they sold the house, comma, what you're doing is you're separating they, which is the subject, from the verb bought. I know it's in ellipsis there, but we don't like to do that. We don't like to separate our subjects from our verbs. Just to give you an example, here's a sentence where the comma would be completely wrong. The teacher, the subject, was explaining grammar, is the verb there is was explaining. You would never put a comma between your subject and your verb. So when you have an ellipsis, it creates the idea of the subject is previously mentioned. So going back over there, or the other way, isn't it? Oh, it's that way. Yeah. No, that way. Over that way. I don't know. I can't tell on the video. So the fact is that the verb would be separated from the subject, and you don't want to do that. So let's remove those commas. Now the sentences read perfectly. They sold the house and bought a boat. Is this a rule? It's kind of a rule. It's pretty much a rule. You don't want to separate subjects from verbs. The longer the sentence, you'll probably need to repeat the subject. Yeah, if you have lots of information in that first clause and your second verb goes all the way down the road, then you may need to repeat the subject. So don't put commas between subjects and verbs. Let's have a little test and see how you do. The first one, she is tall, but he is short. So we have an independent clause, she is tall, he is short, also independent clause, joined by a coordinating conjunction. So that would seem to be correct. The comma is correct. However, I'm going to say maybe because it's short and well balanced. She is tall, he is short, same balance. It's a short sentence. We could have removed the comma if we like. It's correct, but you can remove the comma. Tricky one. Second one, he loves beer, yet barely drinks it. We have two verbs, he loves, and we also have drinks. But where's the subject for the second verb? The second subject is in ellipsis. So he loves beer, yet he barely drinks it. Because the second subject is in ellipsis, this is correct. You don't want to put a comma in there. Letter C, the cake was expensive, yet the icing looked cheap. We have two independent clauses. The cake was expensive and the icing looked cheap. You'll see that the subjects are different here, right? The cake, the icing. So because of that, it's probably best to put the comma in. We have the coordinating conjunction yet. It's quite a long sentence. It's not a short like letter A. She's tall, but he is short. The cake was expensive, yet the icing looked cheap. It's a longer sentence. So due to the length of the sentence, we would probably put in the comma. I'm going to say it's wrong. Definitely put in the comma in a sentence like that. Letter D, the movie was terrible, so I left. Remember, for the word so to be a coordinating conjunction, it needs to mean therefore. Let's try it with therefore. The movie was terrible, therefore I left. Seems to work. The movie was terrible, independent clause. I left, also independent clause. Joined by a coordinating conjunction, therefore it is correct. Last one, they won't fix it, nor will they refund my money. They won't fix it, independent clause. Remember, nor is negative, so the independent clause after it means actually they will not refund my money, which is an independent clause. There's that modification because of the word nor, so that becomes your negative coordinating conjunction. We have the two subjects, they and they. Therefore, No, you need a comma here. You should have a comma. Let's put that comma in. There you go. That would work better, more correct. That would be more correct with a comma. Well, I hope that wasn't too difficult. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Today, we looked at commas in coordination, and we also looked at when not to use them. The next post will be about commas in subordination, which is very tricky. So get prepared. Thank you very much. That has been me, literally, Anthony Rosenberg. See you next time.